Hi there. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Arthritis Life podcast, where we share arthritis life stories and tips for thriving with autoimmune arthritis. My name is Cheryl Crow, and I am passionate about helping people navigate real life with arthritis beyond joint pain. I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years, and I'm also a mom, occupational therapist, video creator, support group leader, and I created the Room to Thrive self-management program. I am so excited to help you live a more empowered life with arthritis. We're going to cover everything from kitchen life hacks to navigating the healthcare system to coping with friends who just don't get it. Seriously, no topic is going to be off limits on this podcast. My interviewees and I share our honest stories of how chronic illness affects our lives. This includes discussions about mental health, sex, shame, pregnancy, body image, advocacy, self-acceptance, and so much more. You'll hear stories from all ends of the spectrum, from a person who's living in medicated remission from psoriatic arthritis to somebody living with severe mobility restrictions and severe pain from rheumatoid arthritis. You'll hear how people manage their conditions in different ways, like medications, mindfulness, movement, social support, work accommodations, and so much more. You'll also hear from rheumatology experts who just get it. We'll dive deep into the science behind chronic pain and what's the latest evidence for lifestyle changes that can help you thrive with arthritis, including exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress reduction, and more. This is your chance to sit down and chat with a friend who's been there. Ready to figure out how to manage your arthritis life? Let's get started.
Welcome to Rheumer Has It, the podcast that busts myths, highlights evidence, and inspires hope for living better with rheumatic disease.
Through plain language interviews with experts, we offer actual knowledge so you can thrive today.
My name is Eileen.
And my name is Cheryl.
Join us as we bust myths and spotlight evidence. So I'm really happy today to have Dr. Manny Esther, who is an expert in physical activity behavior change with a PhD in kinesiology. He's a researcher with Arthritis Research Canada, which is how I'm connected with him as a member of the Arthritis Research Canada Patient Advisory Board. Welcome, Manny. Can you tell us a little bit about your training and how you came to specialize in physical activity specialist?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'll try to keep this brief as I've got a little bit of a winding career. But essentially, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I was deep in the weeds of doing biology, molecular biology research. But at the same time, I was doing a lot of sports and working actually as a certified personal trainer. So this idea of exercise and physical activity was always kind of a passion of mine, but I never made the connection until eventually I came to research the impacts of exercise on cancer populations and how to help people with cancer move more and live better. And then that led me then also to do similar work in the rheumatology space, which is why I'm here today. So basically my expertise, which is where I did my PhD, is all about the actual psychology behind how do we build and maintain these healthy habits. And especially we know it's extra challenging to do this when you're living with a chronic condition. So how do we actually support people with rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatic conditions, or other chronic conditions to become and stay physically active? So that's what I focused my work on. And I think that's really the crux of the matter. It's not about what are the best exercises you can do, but actually what are the exercises that you'll actually do day to day, because we all know it takes a lot of effort and it's hard work to start and maintain those habits.
Oh my gosh, touche. Yeah, I 100% agree. As a patient, it's one thing to know what to do. It's another thing to actually get yourself to do it. So before we get into the specific myths and misconceptions and stigmas today, we first wanted to give you a chance to just give us an overview of the science behind how does physical activity, exercise, and movement positively impact all forms of arthritis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the question, Cheryl. And I know this has been an episode to itself with Dr. Brian Andonian talking about the inflammation and those responses. And funny enough, actually, my previous research focused on inflammation and physical activity in the immune system in cancer populations. So I know a little bit about that world, but I'll try to keep it broad and not overlap too much with what Brian has shared already. So I think broadly, physical activity can help directly with rheumatic conditions. We know that physical activity in the long term actually and has anti-inflammatory effects and also boosts the immune system. So we know about certain immune cells and immune responses that can be strengthened through regular physical activity. So in that sense, it can help directly with those rheumatic conditions and what happens deep inside the body, but also more practically, physical activity is one of the most powerful ways to counteract symptoms that people face day to day and actually empower them to get the most while living with these rheumatic conditions. So for example, things like fatigue, pain, and stiffness, all of those, we know physical activity is one of the most powerful ways to counteract those things. For me, I always like to think of physical activity as one of those really helpful tools to help people live life to the fullest with rheumatic conditions.
That's beautiful. And do you differentiate between physical activity versus exercise versus movement?
Yes, in a technical sense, yes. I don't think it's too important, but we can do a quick run through in terms of, physical activity and exercise are kind of two terms that are often used in the same vein or in the same way. And officially speaking, they mean something slightly different. So when we talk about physical activity, this talks about any movement in the body that requires energy. So when you're just sitting here, when I'm moving my arm, that's physical activity. And then exercise is kind of a smaller piece within physical activity where it's more structured. So exercise is when we talk about specific movements that are designed to improve certain aspects of our fitness or designed with those specific things in mind and that are performed in a more repetitive, structured way. So essentially exercise is a slightly more specific, more structured aspect of physical activity. But we know when we use the word exercise, there's certain kind of connotations around it. So that's why from a behavioral standpoint, I like to talk about physical activity or movement. And we know from a lot of research too, and from talking to people like yourselves, that there tends to be a more positive response and a more approachable feeling when we talk about physical activity or movement versus talking about exercise.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, a lot of people feel really intimidated by the idea of exercise and kind of more excited by the idea of, okay, can I increase my physical activity or just move more? So thank you for helping distinguish between those things. Now I'm going to hand it over to Eileen to go over a myth.
The whole theme of this podcast is to bust myths and spotlight evidence. Canada has some evidence about physical activity, including the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines. There is a myth that if you have to follow these guidelines, which are 150 plus minutes of cardio and 2 days plus of strength training to get any benefit from physical activity. How would you say that myth should be busted?
Yeah, this is a big one. And the physical activity guidelines, whether they're in Canada and many places in the world, I think the American ones are largely similar to what our Canadian guidelines are recommending. The reason these guidelines are there is to give on a public health, population health level, based on all the evidence we have, is to give an understanding of what level might be helpful for a number of different outcomes and might give us kind of the most benefits, I guess, broadly speaking. If you do more physical activity, you can also get more benefits. But this is a big myth because the biggest benefits actually come from going from 0 to 1 minute or 0 to 10 minutes of physical activity and not from going from 140 to 150 minutes of physical activity. So the big thing about this to know is that the benefits of physical activity, kind of the biggest benefits are at that early stage in getting some movement in, whether that's cardiovascular related activity, walking, hiking, things like that, or whether that's doing a little short body weight strength training or anything like that. So I think this is why it's a really important thing to realize that while those guidelines give kind of an aspiration that you might want to work towards, eventually you shouldn't be discouraged in thinking that only if you meet those guidelines are you going to get benefits from physical activity. So any movement is going to get you benefits, and actually the most benefits or the biggest kind of return bang for a buck is going to be in doing a little bit of something if you were previously not doing anything at all.
That is super motivating for people who want to get started, but just feel like they're not able to really dive right into it. It's all about starting small and moving forward. All right.
Totally. Yeah.
And then would you say the same also applies to the 10,000 steps a day fad as well?
Yeah, so 10,000 steps a day is actually, there's a funny story behind this, and some people might have heard about this, but actually, that number and that whole movement around 10,000 steps actually originated from a Japanese marketing campaign that came in the 1960s. Essentially, this was kind of a national campaign that was designed to, yeah, promote movement in Japan, and that's kind of, as you can maybe think of, 10,000 is kind of a nice round number. It's a very kind of marketable number, but now there's so much evidence that shows that much fewer steps than that per day can lead to tons of benefits. And now I think those numbers are still prevalent because those were really successful in terms of promoting physical activity and motivating people. But certainly from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 steps a day, you can get lots of benefits, and there's lots and lots of strong evidence showing that. So it's definitely a myth, but it's something that has been very successful in terms of motivating people, at least to some degree, to be physically active.
Yes, I agree. It is a great motivation, but is it reality? I don't think so. Doing 10,000 steps every day when you're living with a rheumatic disease is a little unrealistic, especially when we're in a real big flare or we have medications that day or
Mm,
all sorts of different reasons.
yeah.
Now, thank you so much for answering that. We definitely understand that physical activity is best to start small and build yourself up. And there's a lot of myths. So Cheryl is going to introduce the next myth to us.
Yay, thank you. Yeah. One of the myths is that in order to get the full benefit of exercise, you have to be in the gym and doing some sort of weightlifting hardcore program. And that's what real exercise is, and everything else is not hardcore enough, as we would say. And I honestly have to say, I used to think this because I was a soccer player and like an athlete, and I did do all those things, going to the gym. And I kind of thought, oh, people doing like jazzercise or something else, that's not real exercise. What would you say to that?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Cheryl, and your own experience. I have to admit to the same thing. I'm also a soccer player, former soccer player, and
Yeah.
I used to have those same thoughts. But when I got into personal training and got more into the research around kinesiology, it's definitely a myth. I think this is actually it's a very prevalent social idea. That's why we don't talk about exercise, because exercise has this connotation that it needs to be CrossFit and it needs to be this like sprinting and very high intensity or running a marathon, right? So like all these things are the very extreme forms of physical activity that we see often in media, or we see glorified for being these, amazing athletes and things like that. So often we have that association because that's what we see and hear about. But it definitely doesn't have to be that. Like I mentioned in the thing around physical activity guidelines, actually doing a little bit of physical activity from no physical activity can be hugely beneficial. And that doesn't have to be going to the gym. It doesn't have to cost you anything. It can be as easy as walking once a day or walking a couple of times a week and doing that with a friend and doing it socially, casually. It doesn't have to be at a high pace either. And it's actually exciting to see the world of exercise science and research in this space more and more start to show how these different forms of physical activity and these more approachable forms of physical activity can actually, yeah, lead to huge benefits both in physical and mental health. So it's a really exciting change we're seeing, and we're hoping that that will also trickle into how we see and talk about physical activity and not just exercise in media and in social circles.
I think that's really reassuring to hear. And whenever I get overwhelmed, I just think to myself, can you do just a little bit more than you did yesterday? But I'll give it to Eileen for the next misconception.
I would just like to highlight that
Oh,
I am not a former soccer player, but I am a soccer mom.
Mhm.
And after this interview, I am taking my son to his soccer lesson where I walk around for an hour around the track. So there I'm gonna have my movement for the day. Also, motivate my son to be involved in sports. It's also just finding how you can fit it into your schedule, especially as a busy parent, working, dealing with illness, everything like that. It's just you got to find where it fits in your day. as well, or even throughout your day. Okay, so we're going to move on to a misconception. And this is one that I think a lot of people assume that we can just go and do. Can people with arthritis just go online and follow any Instagram influencer who gives exercise advice? And if you say no to that, tell us a great resource that you know about.
Great question, Eileen. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of good and bad information out there, I would say, in the social media realm. So, generally speaking, I would say pretty much a huge majority of what we see around physical activity and exercise is really geared towards younger, healthy adults that don't have any major physical considerations to deal with. And that certainly can be dangerous or risky in some ways for people to follow if they are dealing with certain chronic conditions, taking certain medications, having certain injuries or other considerations that have to be taken into account. I think you can get maybe some inspiration, but you shouldn't do exactly the same things or think that this is what you need to do to get benefits. And I think this relates to what we've talked about before already. So it's a really cool tool. It's one of few specific tools that actually tackle this idea of moving well and doing the right movements and building those healthy habits while living with rheumatic conditions. So I think it could be really, really helpful for anyone listening.
Absolutely. It is a very helpful website. It's built by engaging people that live with the condition and with experts in the rheumatology field. So by far, definitely a great resource. And also one of those resources where you can kind of easily look at an exercise and be able to say, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
Or there's modification options. So it's a website that there's a lot of content on it, and it's one that
Mm.
you're gonna definitely need to do a deep dive in, but I highly recommend it because it's far more reputable and credible than just following some Instagram influencers random exercise routine. And every time I do watch those, I watch them because I'm looking for motivation, I'm looking for different exercises, form and things like that. I have almost never seen a full routine that includes exercises, all that I can actually do. There's
Mm.
many I'm like, nope, can't do that one, can't do one because it's going to interfere with my joints. So,
Yeah.
very important to tailor it to how your body is.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, totally.
mhm.
And it can be, if I can jump in for a sec, yeah, it can be,
Abs-
of course, quite demotivating actually to see these things and then not really know how do I adapt it for myself or to try to follow along. And then you feel really super sore for like 5 days afterwards, and that fatigue spikes and all these different things happen, right? So it can actually be demotivating in a way if you try to follow these things and it doesn't quite work. And I think in relation to much of the things we've talked about in terms of how much physical activity, what does it look like? That's one of the big aspects that we highlight through the website is actually this idea of what we've termed as exercise snacks or movement snacks, where it's 5, 10, 15 minutes and it's straight smack dab in the middle of the website when you go there, and it's step by step. There's videos included, and all of those have been tailored to this idea of can you do it with a rheumatic condition, what exercises, what movements are actually fitting and appropriate. And that's something that can be really approachable. It changes every day you come back to the website. It's something you can do in 5 to 15 minutes, and it's not this big going to the gym or doing a crazy fitness routine that you see on social media. That's one of the big things that we've taken into consideration for sure.
That is awesome. I love that. And I am a huge believer in little exercise or physical activity snacks throughout the day because it really helps our joints feel loosened up. All right, we are going to move
Yeah.
on to another misconception, and that is some people believe they should always rest when their joints hurt. And related common double misconception is this mixed message. Patients are told to listen to your body, but also told to exercise even when they're tired or sore. When those signals conflict, it kind of creates a real confusion in us. Like, are we supposed to be physically active or are we supposed to be resting? How much is too much? Kind of thing like that. How do you
Mm.
help patients know when it's time to rest and when it's time to move?
This is something that I think a learning experience where it can be really helpful to, first of all, speak with people that maybe have had a rheumatic condition for longer than you or have figured out the ups and downs of that. But it's definitely, whenever you have a new challenge like that, it's a learning process, right? And I'm sure that both of you and many people out there have experienced kind of this overdoing it or, yeah, not really knowing exactly how to approach that. So I'll try to provide kind of some general guidance and then again go back to this idea that it's a little bit of a trial and error situation. It's hard to give general guidance, but in general, I think if you're feeling what you would kind of classify as mild fatigue or soreness, so not too extreme, you're able to kind of do your day-to-day activities relatively well that day, then in those situations, I encourage you to move as much as you can. Just think about lowering the intensity as needed. So maybe if you are feeling some mild fatigue, you're walking instead of running, or you're doing 10 minutes instead of 20 minutes, just reducing it slightly. I think that's kind of step one. And then if you are experiencing kind of severe fatigue or soreness, and this is maybe something that you would term as like a 7 to 10 out of 10, and it's really impacting even how you feel in the morning or how you feel throughout the day and what you're able to do, then in those situations, a lot of the time it is actually better to prioritize rest and do some gentle movement if you're feeling up for it. So again, this is up to everyone's own personal preference, how they experience that pain and fatigue as well, where they experience it. But generally speaking, trying to do some movement, like doing some arm circles in a chair or standing up while you're at work every once in a while, those very simple things can be things you can do even if there's kind of that severe fatigue or soreness. And I think in those situations, rest is just as important as physical activity. So really prioritizing what I would call high quality rest. So getting extra sleep, getting good nutrition, reducing your stress and as much as you can in that situation is really important, because in those situations, sometimes you require that rest to then get back to a place of that mild fatigue or no fatigue, where then you can start doing more. So it's super difficult for sure. And it's a tricky balance, but kind of doing that slow process. And then with all of that, I think last thing I'll mention here, because I don't want it to get too complicated, is this idea of listening to your body is super valid. And I think the best thing to do is actually the day after, how do you feel? Put a quick note, have a quick reflection. This is what I did. This is how much I did, how hard it was. And this is how I feel a day after, 2 days after. And then maybe you start to notice some of those patterns of like, okay, this was a little bit too much because I had 5 out of 10 fatigue. I did 45 minutes. And then the next 3 days, I just couldn't do anything. So that's that process, right, of self-learning, of understanding where does that limit lie? How do you do it in a healthy way? And then I think you can really build that nice positive feedback loop of like, you're doing what fits for you on the day. You're feeling better the next day. You're building that momentum, regaining energy, things like that.
I have one really small follow-up question with that, and
Yeah.
just to add some clarity, because when living with a rheumatic disease and you do start being more physically active, you are going to trigger more fatigue. But does that fatigue always stick around, or does it start eventually to dissipate?
Something I know Dr. Kim Steinbarger. Remember, she said that her rule of thumb that I try to remember is 2 weeks. If you're initiating like a new program, like a new strength, or in more intense strengthening or cardiovascular exercise, to give yourself understand that there might be like this 2 week lag of feeling worse before you feel better. Is that something similar to what you've heard, Manny, or do you have a different idea?
Mm. Yeah, on fatigue, maybe I'll make a quick note, and then I'll make a quick note maybe around muscle pain and soreness, because I think that's also a relevant one. So in terms of fatigue, I think it's normal after exertion, especially immediately after you do something difficult, to feel slightly more fatigued, and maybe up to kind of like 24 hours later. But if that fatigue is kind of continuing to keep you down for an extended period of time, that's really kind of a sign that maybe that you did a little bit too much. Not a sign to necessarily stop all of that activity, but maybe you kind of re-enter or restart at a lower level. So that fatigue, right? It's this, yeah, you have this negative feedback loop. You're getting more tired. You're maybe not sleeping as well. You're doing less activity. But breaking that is about, yeah, doing those little things and trying to get out of that loop. And I think there's kind of a similar rule of thumb in terms of muscle pain and muscle soreness. And I think there's a lot of confusion there. Joint pain, what does that look like? And the same thing, if you're doing physical activity, it's normal to experience some kind of surface level muscle pain or muscle soreness. And this should only last between 24 to 72 hours after a new activity or an increase in load. So if you're doing more and more, if you experience some mild pain, soreness in your muscles within those 1 to 3 days, that's kind of a normal response. But then if you're having joint pain or if you're having muscle soreness that continues 3 days or longer, this can be a sign of caution that either you're doing the activities in a way that's actually causing, damage to your joints, or you're doing them in a way where it's just overdoing it a little bit and that soreness is just persisting for a really long time. So generally speaking, like that's a good rule of thumb to follow in terms of joint pain, muscle soreness, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it really helps to understand your own anatomy on some level to be able to visualize that. Like to me, the pain of my joints is very different than muscle pain. It's in a different location. It feels different. I don't know if I'm a freak, but I actually like that feeling of like small amount of muscle soreness. Like it makes me feel like accomplished. Like, yeah, my muscles are growing, I don't know. Do you like that too, Eileen, or am I weird?
Yeah, I like to say it burns so good.
Yeah, it burns so good. Like a small, but I definitely have had, I'll never forget in high school, track and field, the first time I ever did lunges in my life, just like standing lunges, I really overdid it. Like my form, I think, was not good. I think I actually just like strained both of my like hip flexors. I could barely walk for like a week. And there's a difference. There's the mild soreness where it's like, oh yeah, I'm pushing myself, I'm growing my strength versus I've really overdone it. But hopefully people will, I don't know, in my personal experience, I mean, the gains are so quick. I actually find myself having, as long as I've stayed within my kind of just right zone of tolerance for pushing myself, I feel more energy the days that I work out. I think it's been a really pleasant surprise. I think hopefully other people will feel that too. I know it can be different. Everyone's different. We always say no one size fits all, but there all sorts of evidence backs up the improvements if you consistently engage in exercise, like the ACR, American College of Rheumatology Integrative Health Guidelines, which I know Eileen was on, one of the patient partners for that it's like the only strongly recommended integrative health intervention of all, even including occupational therapy. It's like I went to school for 2.5 years to become an OT, but it's like you have to be humble to say, like, wow, like it's actually more effective for people to just consistently exercise than like go to an OT.
An OT can help us figure out how to pace ourselves and exercise as well. So don't sell yourself short.
Why not do both? Why not?
Yes.
Because it is conditionally recommended. It's just not strongly recommended. Yeah. But anyway, okay. Sorry. We're so passionate about this. We could talk for 9 hours, but I do want to recognize, like, I tend to have anxiety. So we're going to go to mental health now. And I do actually find that exercise helps me with anxiety. Like it kind of helps me feel more centered and grounded. I know, but I think if you have anxiety, it feels in my body like excess energy, like nervous energy. And so it makes sense that I'm like ready to exercise. So I have energy. It's just bad energy. It's like anxious energy. But I think people who have depression, it's depression and rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory arthritis, which go together a lot of times. It's a uniquely difficult problem because you're just feeling mentally and physically exhausted. And now some ladies and a guy are telling you got to go exercise. Like, I mean, do you have any advice for anyone who feels like they're too tired to even get started? Or what are some general ways that you recommend people just get started with a new exercise habit or movement habit?
Yeah. This is a really good question. I'll probably have a little bit of a long response to this.
It's okay.
This is one of the areas I'm extremely passionate about, and I think this is kind of a starting starting out is something that people tend to get wrong often, and that's not on them. That's actually on our physical activity guidelines and how media portrays physical activity and all those different factors. And you have this feeling of like, if I start something, I need to go all out. I need to like, New Year hits January 1st, I'm gonna go exercise 5 days a week and go to the gym and and all these
Mhm.
different things. So I think the biggest piece of very practical advice is start slower than you think. And even once you get to that step, start one step slower than that step. It's like do very little, because even those very little changes can help kind of break out of that cycle, or whether it's negative energy, whether it's fatigue, whether it's depressive symptoms, mood, all of those things. And that actually is going to start this positive wheel rolling, right? And help you break out of it. So do very little and know that is going to be beneficial, and
Mhm.
really think about how can I do this very gradually. So on day one, it's not doing a run for 60 minutes. It's getting
Mhm.
outside and doing a lap around the block, even if I don't feel so great. Can I try to do something like that? So I think that's one of the really good practical steps, and something that, regardless if someone tells it to us, we tend to forget. And then I think in relation to that as well, one of my tricks for physical activity always is do physical activity that doesn't feel like physical activity, or where you're not thinking about, oh, I'm exercising so hard right now, right? So there's ways to do things in a social way. If you enjoy social activities, go for a walk and chat with people, and then maybe you forget that you're walking and you're just chatting with people. Or do something that's really fun and silly. Put on a song and do a silly dance in your kitchen by yourself if you don't want to be social, but you just want to do something that feels like movement but feels like fun. One of my favorite activities is actually climbing. So I'm a big rock climber, and I think the reason why I'm drawn to it is for those two reasons. First of all, it's really social, and second of all, it's really fun. I feel like I'm a kid that's playing and moving, and I'm chatting with people and socializing. And yeah, the more you can do that, the less you're thinking about the activity, and actually the more you're actually enjoying the process of it, the people you're with, or the environment you're in. If you're just walking by yourself outdoors, these kind of things can help us kind of forget about this effort needed, and that we're doing physical activity, and get, before you know it, you're going to be out for 30 minutes or 45 minutes chatting, or doing something and having a good time. Those are some of the things. And I think, broadly speaking, I always like to break it down into kind of like three relatively simple principles. The first I term as make it your own. So this is about physical activity needs to be something that's personal, that's fit to you, and it needs to relate to what is actually important to you. What might physical activity help you with? Is it a certain thing like playing with your grandkids? Is it a certain function like walking to the grocery store and getting to bring your own groceries home without having anyone help you? So, like, relating it, making it your own, both in why you're doing it and in how you're doing it, is number one, I think, the most important thing. And then the other two is make it social. So, like, the more you can bring people into your movement team, the more likely people are to stick with those habits. And this doesn't need to be like someone that always does physical activity with you. It can be just someone maybe in your family that you're sharing about what you just did that day with. I think people can sometimes get hung up on this idea. I have to have a workout buddy or someone that always does activities with you, but your kind of movement team can be much broader than that. It can be your rheumatologist or your rheumatology nurse who you talk about physical activity with, all those kind of things. So, yeah, number two, make it social, build your team, get support, get people that can keep you accountable. And then number three, I think the most important is make it fun. Don't take it too seriously. It doesn't have to be going to the gym, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Keep it silly. Like, kids are the best example of play and having fun while doing movement. And if we can channel some of that, we also know there's more and more research around this, around actually finding things that you enjoy are going to make it much more likely for you to stick to those habits.
That's beautiful. I'm a big fan of swing dancing and jazz dancing, and that's been so true for me because it's social and it's fun and it's like a creative expression. So it's hitting a whole bunch of different for me personally, enjoyable things. I've always thought it would be fun to do like a little arthritis friendly dance class, but I'll add that to my giant list. We're ideas people. We both have long lists of ideas.
Mhm. I
I love
I
that.
just want to touch in that I'm an introvert, so I like to exercise in my own time, in my own peace, but I still like the social aspect, and that
Mhm.
is having Cheryl to talk about exercise or other people in the chronic illness community, posting about it on social media, creating content, participating in research. So it doesn't necessarily need to be that you have to be, exercising with someone because for me personally, I need my headphones and my music blaring for it to be fun and my own.
Definitely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, there are other ways to all in the end just make it your own. I like that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a social thing for sure.
Mhm. All right. So we are at the end of our interview. A lot of great information from you. I feel like getting out and being active right now and a little bit calmer of trying to figure out like how to fit this into my busy schedule. I know that you touched base on it a little bit previous, but can you share an overview on any of that information about that website that you recommended again? Even though I was part of it, I want you to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I can, yeah, share a little bit about it, and I encourage you to explore and look at it yourself and see what fits for you. So the website is called justonemove.ca. And as the name implies, this is all about empowering you to take that first move or to do one move. It's not about doing this crazy routine. It's about getting started. And then, yeah, when you get to the website, we have some really nice practical features. So, like Eileen mentioned, we have a huge amount of content that's all just arthritis friendly physical activities. So, you can go in there, it's called our movement vault. You can search, you can click on flare as a filter, and it can give you flare friendly activities. You can click on specific joints if you want to focus on those things, specific aspects of movement. So you can do like balance and gentle movement, all those kind of things. That's kind of our main big starring piece is this movement vault. So regardless of where you're at on the day, you're going to be greeted with that physical activity snack, and then you're going to be able to search through this huge library, and all the movements again are arthritis friendly. They're vetted by experts and by patient partners to be suitable for this people with rheumatic conditions. So that's amazing. That's kind of the first part. And then other parts that we have on there as well is what we call our habit builder. And again, this gets to the idea of it's really difficult to build and maintain these healthy habits, and how do I even get started? So this is, think about it like having an initial conversation with a coach and getting to take those first steps to think about how can I build physical activity into my day to day. So you create you create your own personal action plan of how are you actually going to do it. And then that's really nice because it actually gives you kind of a PDF that you can download, you can share, you can print, put it up on your fridge, and you have some kind of thing to keep you accountable and a plan to help you. So those are kind of two tools. And then the other aspects, we have a community hub as well, which essentially just has some nice, really, yeah, I think relatable real life stories from other people living with rheumatic conditions about what challenges are they facing? How are they making it work? What makes it difficult? And it's not just about the successes, it's also about what challenges are they going through? What do they kind of do on the day to day, and how they overcome challenges? So that can be really inspiring. If you're not quite ready to hit that movement snack, you can go there and just browse some of the stories. And then the last piece, which I think people are often looking for, is actually kind of like an expert tips section. So this is what we called our arthritis toolkit. And the arthritis toolkit essentially has lots of different, research-backed expert tips around how do I move well in a flare, how do I move safely and get started with movement while having a rheumatic condition, all those kind of maybe common questions or concerns you might have. So if you're coming at it from maybe having a little bit of fear and anxiety around if I do movement or exercise, it's going to make my joints worse, or is it going to cause me to have other problems? You can go to the arthritis toolkit, and there's some really helpful summaries there, and then also links out to other resources and online communities and people that have written about physical activity and arthritis. So those are like all the sections, and there's so much more hidden in there, but really encourage you to to have a look and check it out.
And I just want to add that it is free and it's open to anybody in the world, not just Canadians.
Yes, good ad.
Awesome. And we will definitely put a link to that in our show notes, which we have on the Arthritis Life website, which is myarthritislife.net. That'll take you there. So thank you so much. Do you want to share in one sentence, what is the most important takeaway message you'd like someone to take from this?
This is a really difficult question. I saw this. I was like, oh no, what is the one sentence? But I'll try to summarize. So my mantra around movement is always to say that the best movement is the one that you'll do. I think that's the takeaway I want everyone to have, is that it's not about doing anything crazy. It's not about doing what other people are doing out there and sharing about. It's about finding movement that works for you, finding your reason why movement matters to you, and then making it fun and or social around that. So yeah, the best movement is the one you'll do, and it doesn't matter how much that is. Every movement counts.
100%. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being on here. Wonderful chat with you. And thank you again for listening to another episode of Rumor Has It.
And as I mentioned earlier, don't forget to check out the full show notes on the Arthritis Life website, which will also have the full transcript and link to the video of our conversations too.
We would also love to hear what you think about this episode. Shoot us an email or comment on our social media accounts.
Thanks so much, and bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast is supported by Room to Thrive, an educational program I created to help empower you to live life to the fullest with rheumatic disease. In the program, you're going to learn evidence-based tools for managing all the ways rheumatic disease affects your life. And my goal is to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. You can go through the pre-recorded modules on your own in the self-paced course, or you can take the course along with a robust support group of new arthritis friends to support you and cheerlead you along the way. Learn more in the link in my show notes, or you can always go to www.myarthritislife.net. And if you like this podcast, I'd be so honored if you took the time to rate and review it. I also encourage you to share it with anyone you know who might benefit from it. I also want to remind you that you can find full transcripts, videos, and detailed show notes with hyperlinks for each episode on the Arthritis Life website, plus full episode videos on the Arthritis Life YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for content for future episodes, or you want to share your story on the podcast, please send me, Cheryl, an email at info@myarthritislife.net. I can't wait to hear from you, and thanks so much again for your time.